And we are live.
Right. Welcome to Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. And I think this is probably our 21st recording. As I was looking on that, we started in May and we've made most Sundays. A few other additional things I think were uploaded. But I'm Betsy Cunningham, and Kevin Bell is somewhere in the Zoom room from the distant. And so our regular guest, Zach and John, you want to introduce yourselves and then I'll introduce Ryan.
Sure. Hi, I'm Zach Whitworth. Happy to be here as always. I'm an historian at the University of Oregon. Also involved with the Institute for Social Ecology in Vermont and member of Community Rights Douglas County.
Yeah, I'm John Hunter. I'm with Community Rights Douglas County with the Oregon Community Rights Network.
All right, thanks. So this week I kind of just decided after seeing something on Facebook and then go listening to the school district, the Roseburg School District, and a parent protest around um, transgender use of it specifically this was around the girls' restroom or the girls' locker room. So I reached out to Ryan, who's an activist in the LGBT community, and asked them if they would come and kind of give some insight and perspective about what's happening there. And so, Ryan, you're on. What do you know about it? What should we know about it?
Yeah, 100%. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I think it's super important to talk about these sorts of issues, not only for the obvious reasons of spreading knowledge around and making sure that we all have our facts correct about, what the laws say and all of that, but also there's a tremendous amount of service that's done through visibility of having adults, be live streamed, having a real conversation about this that's not hateful, that's not vitriolic, where we're talking about these children as children and their rights as rights. So all of that to say is I'm super grateful to be here. To protect the privacy of the individual, I don't believe that a lot of the specific details have been made public. I've seen the Facebook comments. You all have seen the Facebook comments. We've all seen the Facebook comments. My understanding was that it was a assigned male at birth child, so AMAB. You might also hear that person be referred to as MTF or male to female transgender. Those are the terms that we would use to distinguish the two different types in the LGBT plus community. That a transgender child was trying to use either the girls' restrooms or the girls' locker rooms. I'd heard both. It was not clear to me which it was. If anybody knows that off the top of their head and can correct me on it, that'd be great. Okay, well, at least it seems like we're all in very much the same page as far as like the official facts were. So very much, very plainly, the law of the state of Oregon says that if an individual wants access to a restroom, you cannot stop them from doing that. That's pretty standard in just about every public space. And it has been that way for quite a bit of time now. One of the things that I'd like to call attention to is that I'm a huge believer in examining the language that we're using in times of social turmoil like this. Because to a lot of our friends and neighbors, the sentence, a trans person is trying to use the same bathroom as your child, can sound scary if you're unfamiliar with the topic. Side note, I don't think that sentence sounds scary at all, but I'm trying to empathize with our other folks. That's why I'm an advocate of changing the language into something that's a little bit more accurate. One of your neighbor's children, who also attends your child's school, wants to use the bathroom in peace. Or perhaps a child who lives in your community doesn't want to be forced to use a separate restroom from all the other children. And adults showed up with signs because of it. That's the part that baffles me the most, I think, that I'm very familiar with how Douglas County is, with how Roseburg is. I've lived here for a long time. I've seen great moments from this county, and I've seen some moments that truly humiliated me, right? And I guess I never thought that there would be such vitriol for a child. I guess I'm used to seeing that kind of hatred reserved for the adults. So this one kind of took me aback. But yeah, that's kind of what I have of sort of the summary of the event.
Betsy, you've muted yourself. Betsy, you've still muted yourself.
Around with the things that pop up on my screen and don't unmute myself. Not intentionally, I can assure you. So what the thing that bothered me the most, Ryan, was really the issue of going after this child. And I actually in a post, I think, in response to someone's comment on Facebook, I did, point that out, that and even in that post, it was a parent, and I invited them to come here as long as there could be, civic discussion about, the concerns. But I was alarmed that parents would do that. And I think what I saw of the school district, they did the right thing. They said they're going to follow the law, right? That's the right thing to do. But does it then assuage all of this hatred, now focused on this kid and alleging things, as calling them a sexual predator, even in the school board meeting, right? Without any kind of specifics. This kind of stuff that, is really highly offensive to me is, saying somebody did X to, and, no disrespect for teenagers, but I've had a few of them.
Mm.
And, I know that sometimes at that age one can exaggerate a set of circumstances, perceptions. And so has there been protests after the school board meeting? Are they still out there doing that? Does anyone know?
I don't know if there's been another physical gathering, but I do want to say that from what I've seen from the online circles, it's still very much a hot topic that we're all on. And when somebody said something, I was at a UVRC meeting the other day, and somebody said something that I'd like to share with you all. So one person asked, like, why does the school just not come out and be like, guys, this is the law. This is what we're doing. We're not going to break the law. Somebody else says they have. They have done that. They've done that a bajillion times, and it doesn't matter. The thing that people are upset about is that they disagree with the law. And it's just kind of like it's frustrating because, well, then the answer is, encourage people to, do what normal people should do when you don't like a law, and that is campaign for it to be changed through the myriad of ways available to us, right? But no, they're grabbing their picket signs and they're going to try and intimidate children outside of a high school. Like, I consider myself a fairly open-minded person in terms of what I accept from others regarding free speech. Like, I'll hear just about any awful opinion on the planet. But this one, like I at the risk of sounding like a broken record, these people are trying to intimidate a child, and it just seems completely different from anything else that we'd seen in this county before.
Mhm.
Well, and the other thing that interests me about this, we started a discussion about the commons, right? Who decides what happens in our, it's commons is more than public space, but for the sake of this, discussion, this idea that, who decides and for what purpose, right? So, and what is the objective? And even, one of the things I was thinking about in regard to the outcome, how can it be any different than what it is, right? I mean, the parents can never be happy, right?
I
I
I
mean,
want to
is
say,
there a common
yeah,
ground? There's not common ground to say it's okay, well, you can discriminate against this kid, right?
yeah.
That's not an outcome.
And the moment that they get that one win, that is the beginning of discrimination for all trans students at Roseburg High School. Like, nobody on this call is a fan of slippery slope arguments. We prefer our arguments in fact, but I think we can all say that it would not be this one child. It would not be this one child. It would be this one child until the next transgender child shows up at Roseburg High School. But yeah, I straight up just wanted to pitch that my solution to all of this complaining is very simple. No mandated nudity in public schools. If there's a chance that students could see one another unclothed, there needs to be sturdy stalls with latching doors. The bathroom shouldn't have even been a big deal to begin with because there's stalls, no chance of nudity being spotted. Like, I truly believe that that solution of just don't force children to unclothed in front of each other, that will be 20, 30 years from now, the solution that everybody's like, well, duh. Well, obviously, why were we not doing that forever? Because not only would that significantly reduce a lot of the bullying that is has nothing to do with the LGBT plus community that a lot of people have a lot of big opinions on the state of Oregon handling, it would also make it so that we don't have to keep having this conversation about transgender students either.
Well, and one thing I thought, my high school reunion was over 50 years ago. I mean, my reunion, my 50, it was 5 years ago or so, my high school reunion. So it's been a while since I've been in a girls' locker room, say. But we had to actually unclothe and shower and in front of each other. And my recollection of that age range, is that a lot of people thought they were being stared at. One is very self body conscious at that age. And so, I could just see, that perception just getting, snowballed into, with the adult help, to explode this into, the reality is that most teenagers don't want to, probably your solution would have made sense to me in high school, just,
Yeah,
the way that most of the girls felt about it in the shower area.
yeah,
So that I don't know, even when we have a looser society, believe me, as far as certain things, I don't think that's changed.
yeah,
My adolescent children probably felt no better, and they're in their 40s, and one just turned 50. So, and so it's very interesting. And I know that Zach was thinking about this in the term of the commons, and you have some input, Zach.
Well, I've got a lot that I actually want to say on this. I am firstly to Ryan's point, facts really do not matter in this case. Um, we spoke about something similar when we were discussing some weeks ago the Umpqua Public Transportation District's disaster with Ben Edel's involvement, the anti-vote by mail campaigns, Todd Vaughn's case against Natasha Atkinson that's still ongoing in the courts. Uh, Facts are not of any significance to these people. This is a moral question. It is a question of ideals, of what one considers to be even real, and a uh, a challenge to material reality itself, which can get us to the commons. We'll talk. I want to talk a bit about how it says something about nature. Um, also, again, to Ryan's point that facts do not matter in this case. This is not about this one kid. And in reflecting on this before this meeting, uh, I I feel bad having to have this discussion in the first place because it has been premised on this kid at Roseburg High School as a centerpiece. It didn't even the fact that we are having this discussion, which now is, I guess, a necessary evil. We deny the basic dignity of this student, this kid, this high schooler. Um, and also, I don't see that this issue of who's supposed to use what bathroom is really so much about bathrooms per se. I am of the view that this is more a matter of sexual discipline and social domination, not about bathrooms. And I would even say more so about sexuality. It's more so about sexuality than just gender. Because this affects far more than trans kids, thinking bigger picture. So, as Ryan said, the circumstances are kind of unclear, to obviously protection of the kid, a parent kid, purportedly, their privacy. Um, but that means that what one is reading in the news review, what one is reading on Facebook are little more than rumors. Rumors, hearsay, uh, the testimony even of antagonistic high school students who have agendas of their own are being taken as proof of something. Um, so I'm looking at my notes here. I've taken a lot of notes. So I see the issue essentially one of sexuality. It means it's not just one about presentation, like how a kid is presenting themselves in school, what they're wearing, uh, you know, how they how they behave in mannerisms, how they speak. Uh, it's sexuality, which is uh, far more internal a characteristic than presentation. Um, there's also this premise in this case that can be seen in the anti-trans demonstrators, students, and other adults who joined them. There is this premise here, and I would say this is the premise to most discussions about transgender people and bathrooms, that there's a premise that sexuality is associated with predation, like fundamentally, like meaning, uh, what else is meaning? It's asserting that sexuality has an essentially violent character to it. And more so than transgender people, there is a premise here that boys, even non-trans boys even, are essentially violent. Um, it's also premised on a view of difference, heterogeneity, people being different from one another, as being an antagonistic relationship. The fact that you are different than another person does not mean there's any kind of harmony you can reach, complementarity between you. You are in contradiction with other people by virtue of your difference, and always potentially a violator of somebody else in your difference. Um, there's also an element here. So, uh, what am I saying here? I'm just going to look at my notes. So I see a major outcome of these demonstrations is that there's not only um, there's not only clearly a systemic persecution of trans kids and now organized mobs who are threatening them. But all students, not just trans students, are going to be subjected to more intense sexual scrutiny because of this kind of action. I see consequences for lesbians, for girls who are not transgender, who are gay. Because if you're in a if you're a girl in a girl's locker room, you're also going to be under threat under this premise that uh, anyone is a potential violator of someone else in a locker room. I see that this kind of mentality and organization will lead to what we would call cisgender kids being encroached upon in their privacy to greater degrees, to root out sexual deviancy. So trans kids and non-trans kids. Uh, I also think that what is um, what's also apparent to me is that when this group of students with adults are out on the street, it shows an openly organized and externally supported student mob that demonstrates something about it shows something about the changing character of the school internally. That internally there is an increasing absence of safety for anyone in a school locker room. And that has to do with that increased scrutiny of students' peers, policing each other, uh, of openly looking to investigate each other's sexuality and gender. Um, and I would say that's not unlike what paramilitaries do. Paramilitaries who operate as unofficial arms of state violence. I mean, this is present in Nazi Germany. Youth groups like the Hitler Youth, um, or in in the Soviet Union under Stalin, the Young Pioneers would be similar. They are not just clubs, but they are also there to police their peers, fellow children, in this case, fellow teenagers, high school students. Um, so that greatly concerns me, and um, it gets me onto asking what's novel about this. Like what is actually new? Because I'm a graduate of Roseburg High School. My dad is a graduate of Roseburg High School decades and decades ago. I had a conversation with him about this, and we both reminisced, if such a thing could be said. We remembered the rampant sexual harassment in Roseburg High School for generations. Even back in the 1970s when my dad was in high school, uh, you could not even think about being a queer student. If you were even uh, thought to be gay in the slightest, you could have the crap beaten out of you. The difference that I see here is this anti-queer harassment and violent inclination is now appearing organized, and it's appearing organized externally. Clearly, and admittedly, even in the News Review article on this, it's been steered by outside adults agitating students to do this. I also don't think it's an accident that this has happened not too long after a mass group of high schoolers at Thurston High School here in Oregon walked out of their classrooms following Charlie Kirk's assassination. Um, it's certainly in the context of that. Uh, Other things that came to mind were even when I was a student, early 2010s at Roseburg High School, uh, even teachers were sexually harassed by students, including by girls, male teachers sexually harassed by teenage girls um, who are not trans. Nobody in those situations trans. Uh, nobody's gay in those situations. There is a culture of cruelty that has long been at play in the school that's appearing organized here. Um, so it also says to me that the demonstration also says to me that this has been building in advance, that this is not just in response to a single event, a single student who's the catalyst for this demonstration. Uh, it it seems that this is a developing tendency, and a single case is just used as an excuse to finally do this. And I was thinking about like the Reichstag fire in early Nazi Germany in 1933. It's still pretty unclear if somebody set fire to the Reichstag, the government built the federal government building in Berlin, if somebody set fire to it or not, or if it was an arson attack or who did it. It doesn't matter to the Nazis. They just use it as a point of propaganda, and they use it as an excuse to crack down on whoever the hell they want to. Uh, a bigger worry, I would say, would be that not only is this a an organized student mob that has clearly shown its face that exists in the school, but the public demonstration has now brought that mob into a position where it is gaining widespread endorsement from beyond the school, including from certain government officials, like Virgil Osborne, for example. And that effectively deputizes this mob,
Yeah.
which is why I'm
Um,
comparing it to a paramilitary at this point. I hate
yeah,
to say that about a group of kids, but historically speaking, a lot of paramilitaries in authoritarian states have been youth groups.
mhm. They're the easiest. That's why the military gets you so young, right? Kevin, you had your hand up. Are you still there? Um, and you'd have to unmute
I'm
yourself.
still
You
here.
might have just.
Well, this goes back to a conversation we had a little bit ago. One, I believe, with Zach entirely. What this is it's a continuation of, especially in our world of hyper political violence. This is just another way that fear induces more action than anything else. Especially when we put we demonize sexualization, and we've always seen like cultures that are repressive in their sexuality, and just like Zach was talking about, have always been on the losing side of history. But that again, that's a liberal democratic viewpoint that's been around for forever. They're always the losing side. I mean, what we're seeing right now is that they may be winning. This is America, and they're on top right now. So I think it's very important to really put that in perspective, that the liberal democratic view that has been the persistent viewpoint for the cultural identity for the United States has started to, completely diminish. I mean, from the 20s on, that used to be, you used to claim and celebrate the liberal democratic views of the United States, but now it's not a thing. But going even farther into that, this is just the three ways people on the right, the neo-fascist, whatever we have in our community, start to organize the community against themselves, because frankly we're just starting to hate our neighbors and stuff like that. And one of them is they're always you always have the words, and then when you start saying it, it goes away. But they attack sexuality, they attack the intelligent, and they attack the disabled. You know what I mean? Those are their three really easy targets to go on to. And frankly, all I'm hearing about, especially transgender bathroom issues or locker room issues, right there, is just a continuation of their war against one, trans people and women. One, because apparently women are not strong enough to stand up for themselves. If there is some sort of attack in the bathroom, apparently they must be protected by the strong white male, which, creates the culture of, like, they can take care of themselves. They're strong, independent people. You know what I mean? So what if something happens? That's that. That's a entirely different situation for a different time. But right now, all I hear is that we're just attacking people and trying to put them into different classes so that they, fight in the bathroom, when frankly it should just be you go in there to have a peaceful time. Uh, like I was saying though, that this just every time I hear the demonization of the trans people, which trans lives are real lives, let's all get this straight, people, is that it's just a continuation of the war on women and the war on transgender people. One, the obvious and the obvious target is trans people. Let's be completely obvious. That's the person that they're arguing against. But it's also a war on women's rights in general, because now that they don't allow, I mean, yes, it's about not letting people in the bathroom, but it's also about denying people access to quality care. It's about denying people access to stand up for themselves. Apparently now there must always be some sort of contingent or barrier or overwatching superficial system to make sure that there is not a trans person in a different bathroom, instead of just letting people be people. And I think that's, one thing that people keep dismissing or always forgetting, is that right now that they're attacking the trans community, but really they're attacking the broader swath of what is freedom, in my opinion, because it goes farther than sexuality, because sexuality is just the face of this all. You know what I mean? But it really gets into being a misogynist, being, anti-female and things like that, because really what you're now arguing against is that the idea that females cannot protect themselves, that they are some sort of lower class citizen that, cannot make decisions, they have to be protected, which, creates the idea that they're second class citizens, which, is just, it's a slippery slope. And I think people really should stand back and really take that into account, that all these are attacks on bigger things, and it's an excuse to band together, if anything. That's my 5 cents.
Very much to your point, Kevin, and then also it was originally Zach who mentioned something like this that I want to bring this up. Like I now identify as a masculine person. I refer to myself as a man. In the next couple of years, I'll start resembling one more like it. But for the majority of my life, I've thought about the world from the point of view of a woman. And I have always had this little saying about feminism, and that it was that I'm a feminist because I'm more likely to be killed by a romantic partner than my brothers are. And I'm also a feminist because my brothers are more likely to commit suicide than I am. It's both, right? And the reason I bring this up is because we talk a lot about the damage that's being done to anything, trans kiddos, girls at school, like the establishment of privacy and respect. Let's take one tiny second and think about the little boys at that school, right? Because that's the thing that transphobes are always trying to suggest, is that being trans isn't real, so this child is a boy, right? Think about all of the boys at that school who watched their classmates walk out holding picket signs because they couldn't handle anything approximating what they would consider a boy coming into the bathroom or the locker room. Like, I would say that certainly not the most, I don't want to say not the most important aspect of the issue, but it's one of the aspects of the issue that we need to be thinking about because you're exactly right. We're treating all trans people like predators, and by an extension of that is all the victimization of female children and the villainization of male children. Neither are good.
Yeah, there's a real romantic element to this, a like romantic literature, which takes women to be pure and spotless and closely associated with nature. And on the other side, men are understood as little more than brutes, as unthinking, vicious, violent animals who have to control themselves and their animalistic urges because they're little more than a beast. And that kind of mentality is exactly what I've become familiar with, having grown up in Roseburg, uh, in circles that professedly preach Christianity, like the Wellsprings Church members who were involved in this demonstration at the high school, and that crowd and the anti-queer attitude that they hold fundamentally has disdain for the world. This is where I'm going to get at the commons element. They have disdain for the living, breathing, concrete world of life itself. It's nothing more than sinful. Um, like nature itself, nature which is ever developing, evolving, constantly changing, and uh, often very ambiguous and hard to pin down. On all of its complexity and ambiguity, it's condemned. It's seen as nature itself, which we are part of, is seen as a thing only to be mastered, to be dominated and controlled. And what if an intelligent feminist would call gender roles, for example, or uh, what a more economistic view of gender might say, sexual divisions of labor. These are forms of control. And they are forms of control, not just of people, but forms of controlling the natural world itself. And I think of what we would call queerness, transgender people, gay and bisexual people, asexual people, gender non-conforming, sexual non-conforming, as examples of ambiguity in nature, of complexity and variety in nature. There's a very famous anthropologist named Franz Boas, famous for his work in the early 20th century, who was a sharp critic of the eugenics movement back in the day, which revolved around disability. And the eugenics movement often uh, would suggest sterilizing or just euthanizing, killing people with birth defects, deformities, disabilities. And Franz Boas, an anthropologist who actually studies humans, argued that disability, what we call disability or defects in human populations, could just easily be attributed to natural variety appearing in human development. I don't think it's so different for for trans and queer people today. It is a demonstration of the immense variety, uh, the the variability, the changing, uh, ever evolving, developing character of humanity. And this view that uh, I would say less so the student demonstrators and more so the adults who are spurring them on, egging them on, and fueling that fire. I understand that as being antagonistic to variety as such, to gray areas, to ambiguity, which is to be opposed to basic principles in the natural world. And that applies, of course, to commons, like a space in a region that has no clearly defined purpose, that at one time or another might be used for something specific, but has a changing, adaptable, variable character. It's hard to pin down. And closing upon those things, creating rigid categorization, fences, or in our case, sexual and gender divisions, that renders it commercial, profitable. That making it legible, clear, readable, distinct, is part of what enables a commons to become exploited. And that seems to be the core of this. These A trans kid in school, bathrooms aside, a trans kid is by virtue of existing in opposition to this, refusing to be controlled, refusing to be uh, refusing to be exploited, refusing to be defined by highly commercialized categories. I mean, being like identified as a man or a woman, this day and age is mostly to sell you something.
That's probably true. And there is that point is that this kid, they say, was offered the opportunity to go to the individual bathroom, right? And refused. That's what what they're claiming, which, good for them, right? Why should they have to do that? But
I actually had a tiny point on that, Betsy. If I could very quickly, I
yeah,
just wanted to say I am vehemently against anything that could be interpreted as othering a child and the othering making them feel different from their peers. And let me be specific about this. I am disabled. I have been since birth. So I have been othered in every single classroom that I've ever been in my entire life. Sometimes, most of the time actually, completely on accident, teachers were trying their hardest. And it's tiny little things, right? It's the fact that I needed to sit in a certain spot in the classroom. So we would, every 6 weeks rotate where we sit or whatever. My spot would never move. And people would ask me, Ryan, why don't you move? You never seem to move. Why is that? And I'd have to explain every time and I would feel different, right? And it's whenever we, roll in the old TV, right? Because I graduated in 2018, so I'm so old enough to remember when the TVs rolled in, and I had to really quickly refigure out my situation and maybe sit in an awkward spot to make sure that I could hear it correctly. Those are both very minor examples, but I can't tell you how awful things like that made me feel when I was a child, getting pulled out for hearing tests and all kinds of things like that. I can't tell you how othered and how different it made me feel. So I heard about, oh, this student was offered their own special separate area, and like it nearly brought tears to my eyes because I was like, I don't know that as a child I would have had the strength to say no to that. So I think I just really have a lot of admiration for this student for being like, no, I'm not going to let you other me, put me in a different category. I'm just like everybody else. I want to be doing the same things that they are. So anyway, sorry for that brief little aside there, but that was my last little point that I really wanted to get across was my experiences as a disabled kid not being like the other children in my classes, you know.
Yeah, you're
Ryan, I
absolutely
really
right.
like your point because even in a situation when we might say that could be considered a form of a kind of bastardized equity, somebody being given certain um,
I guess he's just stuck.
Oh. Well, real quick, while he comes back on, I do want to quickly say and clarify that I am very grateful for the accommodations that were provided to me throughout school. I am not trying to complain about that whatsoever. I just meant that receiving those accommodations often came at the cost of feeling different from my classmates. That was the
Yeah.
point there.
Yeah, and I used to be a special ed advocate, and I've had two of my kids need services. And I understand that. The reality is that, and years ago I took a class at Eastern Oregon. It was based on a book out of England that really was trying to address the systemic problems that how do you fix a system that is exactly what you say, whether it's disability, whether it's transgender rights or anybody else's rights. How do you make those accommodations, or how do you integrate people's rights into a society that is so other oriented? That's the big fix. But I think you're right, and it does definitely apply in the world of kids in special ed for whatever the reason that they're in there. you know and so that's a good point, because um generally kids have complained to me being pulled out of class for whatever it is, right? Or having to go in a special class. And I remember that we actually had special ed when I was in high school. And I remember kids hiding until the bell ring, particularly at junior high and high school, before they would slip into the designated classroom that could identify them as being different than everyone. I thought it was actually cruel. It's a cruel system. So and it shapes your personality, right? It's not just how you feel bad at the time. It's this experience that one goes through, particularly as a child. And the person being a high school, I don't want to be derogatory to that person, that when I say kid, but at my age, lots of people are kids,
Kid.
but they are still a child, right? In the sense of what we're talking about. Even if they're 15, 16, 17 years old, it doesn't really matter. But no insult to that person, particularly about their age, but it's really the idea of picking on, identifying and picking on someone who is a minor, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, so
Well,
I don't know if we're going to get Zach back. And Kevin's still in the call. Do we have anything else we want to say about this? John, you've been, relatively quiet.
No, I just been listening.
So anything else on this subject?
Yeah, I heard something interesting yesterday. I don't know if you heard this or not, Betsy, but I heard that Chris Boyce got kicked out of the house by his wife.
I don't know about that, and I don't want to go into such things on this show.
Okay.
I just like to step out of people's personal businesses,
Well, I found that interesting. That's what I heard yesterday.
Yeah, well, um, given my experiences with his personality, I could certainly take sides without even really knowing anything. But that would be unfair. My experience is only with him politically. I hope that I hope that if that's true, that we have enough wherewithal to kick him out of the county commission office. Okay. That's what we need to do. So maybe we could talk about it. No, just as a rallying cry, because one of the things I was going to talk about is the Democrats had a fall jubilee. Did anybody here go? Apparently I didn't, or I wouldn't be asking the question. Did you go, Brian? No.
Wasn't able to. No, sorry, I didn't realize I was muted.
Part of that was to give some folks who have stepped forward and said they will run for county commissioner the opportunity to kind of get their presentation out there. So that two of them have actually right now, each one of the county commissioners filed for reelection, and each one of them has an opposition candidate. Tim Freeman has Brandy Stone, um, and and Chris Boyce, Andrew Rosales, who's the chair of the Democratic Party, filed to run for county commissioner against Chris Boyce, and that ought to be fun. And then Lori Wicks, who's relatively new, last few years in the community, that we that got involved since the election in the Democratic Party, is also has filed, and she's running against Tom Kress. And
Oh,
so,
that's
uh,
wonderful to hear that Lori's actually running because I know she was
yeah,
waffling.
yep. It took a while, right? I started lobbying her a few months ago, and I think Andrew helped. Um, and we also, it looks like we're going to have somebody who is a libertarian that those of us in the Democratic Party who have been working on this are would like to support. There's a technical issue regarding the Democratic Party and endorsements, but there's a Shane Kelly out of Myrtle Creek. They're very active in Myrtle Creek. And then there's Nick Mitchell, who is also very active in Myrtle Creek. He's actually a Pacific Green Party member, and last I was aware. And Shane is a libertarian, but very progressive. And if you look at what both of them have been doing in their communities, there's also a couple of other candidates that I don't know if they actually formally announced and decided to. But the reality is that in order to get any one of those county commissioners, even to a runoff, there's going to have to be more than just two candidates in each race, because it's an uphill battle, get running against any one of them. Although keep in mind that Chris Boyce, and the last time he ran for county commissioner 4 years, well, 4 years ago, next year, in 2022, he only won by a little. He didn't even win by 51%. It was 50 point something percent. It was enough to win at the primary, but it was close enough. But he also had five, I think, opponents running against him. So the bad news in that is all five of them collectively couldn't push him into a runoff. But I think there is enough controversy around him that that may be an opportunity. So, um, and I'm hoping they do, and at least and hopefully these candidates that I've talked to them a couple of times. And I've talked to Andrew all the time and Lori, but I think that they're a good thing for our county. So, ironically, if it weren't for the Trump administration, I'm not even sure that it would be feasible to, make that argument. But then again, there's a division within the Republican Party, people tell me. And so that divide, we see in other um, issues. So, John, have any thoughts about the county commissioners? And I know it's like May, but the reality is we have to be pushing forward some of these people in order to see, make sure that there's a vote at least. And I've said this even within the party that getting them to a runoff would be a win. It would be a major win, really, given who
Yeah,
it's controlled.
getting any of them into to a runoff would be a victory.
Yeah.
Andrew against Boyce would be interesting. Yes.
It could be fun.
as for Freeman's opponent, I don't have any comment.
Well, I think that there will be more than there'll be at least three candidates, is my guess, for each one of those seats. There's going to be somebody probably in the Republican Party
Well,
jumping
you figure
in
Ashley
to.
Hicks is going to run probably. So
Maybe I'll encourage her to do so. That's not a bad idea. Well, they really do need to have at least three for, this to have a chance to kick them into a runoff, which would be great. Um, and actually, even more than that, and not necessarily a strategy that's conventional within a Democratic Party mindset, but when you look at that how many there are like 35, almost 35,000 registered Republicans, and there's 32,000 registered non-affiliated voters, and so and a little over 15,000 registered Dems. So when you look at that, there's no way to win without the having a coalition candidate. That's why I'm kind of excited about the Libertarian and the Peace and that Pacific Green Party member. And if we can, support their candidacy, and I certainly personally would support anyone who can kick them into probably anyone who could kick them into um, a runoff. Any one of the three, but we're all, but my bet is that Boyce is probably the most vulnerable. So um, it looks like we permanently lost
Zach.
Zach, and
And
Kevin said he had to go, messaged and said he needed to go. And so he's off the call. So, Zach is back in once. Uh, So the other thing I had was just the transportation district, because I talk about the commons and really, when we look at how not to run government, we have several examples. And one, is the update we talked about a little bit last week about the Winchester Water Control District and the presentation. And I think I might have mentioned that the Winchester Water Control District offered initially to do a presentation, or at least somebody on the board offered to do a presentation to counter Water Watch's presentation of the League of Women Voters. Apparently, they pulled out of that Water Watch, and then there's on the League of Women Voters website. There's a there's a letter. Which actually crossed my mind, and I think I'll be sending off an email because I had sent them a request to be notified of any of their meetings. Because a member of a public, you can ask to be notified of any of the public meetings that public entities have in Oregon, and they're supposed to let you know. I never got a notification, so I don't know how they got their letter together to reject the League of Women Voters offer to speak if they didn't have a public meeting. That would have been something they would have had to have a public meeting in which to do. So I don't know if that happened within that time frame. And it's not, in the scheme of things, probably not a big deal, but it could be a violation of Oregon public meetings law, which, I mean, would we be surprised if the Winchester Water Control District Board violated the law? So I don't know if if there's anything I don't know what's gonna happen in regard to that. My understanding is that um, one of the compelling arguments was the water. I did get, someone from Water Watch sent me some of the data on the water source for the city of Roseburg, which I'm following up with to see, is there something, because what piqued my interest, I think I had mentioned from that presentation, was the pressure treated wood that is being used, that the water, goes through, that's right there near the intake in the dam, and the potential hazard that is to the drinking water source. So I don't know what else is happening with the Winchester Water Control District. And then Zach had raised the issue that the litigation between the Umpqua Transportation District, there was some stuff out on the blogosphere, particularly Netflix next door, um, about um, they didn't dismiss, the judge did not dismiss a complaint against the county clerk, elections clerk Dan Loomis, regarding the election, but the folks who are on that side were trying to portray it as there was some legitimacy to the claim. But what happened is there was not really sufficient allegations in the complaint that Todd Vaughn originally filed pro se. And so it looks like what happened is the judge actually gave him 30 days to amend his complaint as opposed to, dismissing it based upon failure to state a cause of action is what they usually call it in civil litigation. So it's not even a matter that anybody's made any ruling on the substance. It's just a procedural thing that if it's amended and he now has a lawyer, that may end up, fixing things, but it also may not. There may not be a legal grounds, the facts may not support a legal claim. And so who knows what's going to happen. So, and the reality is right now that everybody's in place from the election, and so business can happen. But then the impact of the budget transportation issue has been more impacted. I think that, just a week or so ago, they ended routes to South County on the bus system because of the economic situation that the transportation district in, but that does not necessarily relate to the people that are on the board, and that's conflict. But if you look at the 3 or 4 top paying people in the district after the MAGA folks got in there, there's like, $400,000 of the budget was spent on, the top 4 salaries, which is pretty high given the size of the size of a district.
Cute trips to Washington, D.C., where nobody actually learns anything. Vacation for their higher ups on staff. All right, my
Yeah,
Wi-Fi cut out earlier, but I'm back.
yeah, yes, we noticed. Um, So tomorrow night, the city council is supposed to, actually in the mayor's report, I see that what their next step is the urban campground. I think I brought up, before about the last time the mayor, spoke and maybe flippantly said, let them be where they are at Deer Creek Park. We actually are, trying to pull together to find us a way to do that. So, and actually from the community to lay out that plan, which was one of the main objections about how to manage it. So there is a group that came out of the H-Tag group, which is the agency group that kind of has been trying to address homeless and housing issues for, it's probably close to 10 years now.
Mhm.
So that's all. I think that's the only things that I wanted to bring up. Anybody have any other
Yeah,
news or information?
I'd just like to follow up on the Winchester Dam thing because they seem to only hold one public meeting a year, and that's in June. And they notify in the news review uh, under the community meeting section. And they post it maybe a week in advance at the best. So that's, and I've been following for 2 or 3 years, and that's when they hold their public meeting. And they only seem to hold it on Zoom. This year the meeting conflicted with all of us. I think the Democratic Party had meetings that night, and Community Rights Douglas County had meetings that night. So they only seem to meet once a year.
And if that's happening, I do wonder if they're violating, it's actually technically, I think, a violation of the executive session law.
Well, they're probably, I mean, they're in violation of a lot of things.
Right. That's why I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah.
And frankly, in the advocacy work I've done over, quite a few years here around public entities and the public meetings and the public records law, it really is these small districts. Although there should be little excuse for Winchester Water Control. They have at least 3 people, 2 or 3 people, at least 2 who've been licensed lawyers in the state of Oregon. They may not be currently licensed, but there's really kind of no excuse for them not being able to pick up there's a whole manual the Oregon Attorney General has on the public meetings and records law. So if you want to know what it means or their interpretation of what it means, and also citations of case laws that have delved into it, and there's not necessarily a whole lot of that. But the one big thing was that people not understanding records access, what the public records access is, and also not really understanding the nuances of public meetings, which means, that I see no way they can make a decision to sign a letter to say no to the League of Women Voters. We're not coming without having a meeting. I just don't see that they would be able to do that. So without a public meeting. So I'll see what they say to me. And then, if I have some free time, if they don't give me a good response, that is something you can file a complaint with the Ethics Commission. They do look at potential violations of the executive session laws, which I would argue that this would be if they're holding meetings to decide they're doing executive sessions when they shouldn't. And if they are only having one meeting a year, how do they actually conduct business?
Well, none of us have ever been to the meeting, so we don't know what they did. I've asked for minutes of their meetings and they've never responded.
Well, here's the good news. You can go to the local district attorney and ask them to enforce the records law. So keep that in mind the next time you do that. That they actually have the legal obligation to enforce the violations of the public records law. Again, against the attorney general does it against state entities, but in any other public entity, it's the local district attorney that's supposed to be doing that. So anything else that we
I would just like to say on this pressure treated issue, it's there, and even Mike McCarthy said at that first at that presentation that the Roseburg city tests its water, and that's basically the issue. They're only required to meet EPA standards, and for rural areas, those standards are even a little lax. So something like testing or proving that there's pressure treated material in the drinking water, they aren't required. It isn't required in their testing, and if it can be tested, it would take a whole lot of money and a whole lot of research, and would probably take kind of a scientific study done over time to show that it's in the water supply and how much it is. I know that the material in pressure treated, it breaks down over time, and in an aquatic situation like this, I mean, the material is always being broken down and washed away. So maybe the concentration was more 10 years ago than it is now. So as far as I know, there's no way to even test for it. So
yeah, and that was my concern when I looked at it, when another group brought the whole thing up, because I do live in the city of Roseburg, and I don't drink their water, but I use it in other ways. But my concern was, when I was looking at what do they test for, is that easy legal hook? But there could be some political pressure put on the city council members, right? If there is, some issue there. But I certainly am not a scientist. I'm not the one making that decision. I just want to look at it and,
yeah,
throw it in their lap.
it would be nice if there was scientific studies done at it. There, it'd be nice if there was more scientific study done on the migratory fish than this would Roy, than this would has been done from visual operations, and and a few facts. This is Douglas County, so they're not going to push any. There's not going to it's kind of a negative science attitude anyway. So we're, it's tough.
Anything else?
I did yesterday where I was at too. Ellen Porter was there from Roseburg City Council, and I kind of gathered from a statement she made that she's not going to run again. So I can't say that positive, but she didn't talk optimistic about she wanted to run again.
Yeah, I can see why that. And she's actually been someone who's been supportive of some place for people to go,
Yeah,
just not across from Laurelwood where she lives, which is where
yeah.
they happen to be right now.
It
Um,
was
so
it was interesting because this guy Bill Gow was there, who's I worked with him on the home rule thing. He's basically a Trump man, but he fought against the pipeline that was going through his property, and he's actually not a bad guy, even though he's a Trump guy. But you can talk to him anyway. He asked Ellen Porter when he found out that she's on the city council. He says, "You still got that knot? You still got that knot? You still got that knot head for mayor?"
yeah, speaking of knotheads and candidates, we need somebody to run for mayor in the city of
Yes,
Roseburg. So if you live in the city of Roseburg, which I
right.
don't think anybody here but me lives there, and that ain't happening. So yes, we need a new mayor. Hopefully he'll retire, but um, maybe we'll
Well,
make it that it's not fun anymore, so he'll retire.
it was
Uh,
interesting watching Ellen's reaction to his statement because I think she agreed with him, but she didn't really want to admit she agreed with him.
um, Ryan, the one thing that we didn't really ask, so what could we as a community do that obviously, we're kind of on the sign of supporting, trans kids, trans people. And what can people do to kind of counter this if it continues to escalate?
Never underestimate the power of visibility. Even the teeny tiny things that we as adults might take for granted, teenagers do not, right? So little pins with the trans flag on it, little bracelets, things like that, any stickers on a car. There are actually I regret that I don't know the name of the company off the top of my head, but there was I believe it was a small business who circulated a series of pins that basically stated some more poetic version of I am a safe person to go to the bathroom with. Like if you need a bathroom buddy, you don't want to go alone, for whatever reason, I'll go in with you, and you don't have to go alone, which can be super reassuring for people in public spaces. Um and honestly, yeah, it's just difficult because in this position there's no law to appeal. There's no, because the we know what the law says. It's the outrage of other people that we're against. So the biggest thing that we can do is just show support and make sure that those kiddos know that they are loved unconditionally by members of their community, and that their adult peers are waiting for them with open arms.
If I might add to that, I think that other students at the high school are very necessary support for trans kids in the school. And if you're listening and you have a kid at Roseburg High School, I mean, I'm sure they probably know about it, but talk to them about it. Because internally, that's your best defense. A defensive of kids who just want to live their lives within the school. And teachers also important to be support for. There are some good teachers still I know at Roseburg High School who are supportive, but being vocal and hell, being brave, uh, and saying the right thing, doing the right thing is desperately needed. Actually, I wanna finish where I got cut off really quickly earlier when my Wi-Fi cut out on the separate bathroom, the private bathroom solution, quote unquote, that even if it is treated as a special accommodation for a particular need, what those can often do is uh, in appearance be presented as a kind of privilege for really underprivileged students, for students who are vulnerable and prone to be targeted. Other students can look at them and say, look, they've got a private bathroom for themselves. I want a private bathroom for myself. Why do they get one and I don't have one? That's a recipe for cruelty, for harassment, and worse. Uh, so I would say there, the only solution, broadly speaking, the only solution is a kind of integration that uh, difference has to be accommodated for by bringing difference into the fold of the community, the school community, the municipal community, the county community. Uh, we have strength in our variety and our complexity, and separating difference from the body of the community is a recipe for animosity and persecution of those who have no real defense. And that applies the same to homelessness in Douglas County. Similarly, uh, I get situationally establishing a zone for people to camp, Deer Creek Park, but that is not a real solution. It's a band-aid, but homelessness is solved by housing people. And that means integrating, bringing people into our own neighborhoods and welcoming those who are the worse off in our communities into our neighborhoods, into our communities, because they're part of us. They are our neighbors. And I'm sure some of you have heard or read uh, vitriol against unhoused people in our communities because they receive certain privileges. They get special
Toilets.
treatment that the rest of us don't get, or so-called welfare queens are getting privileges that others don't get. That is it's no way to bring people into a community, to bring difference into the community and make it a real living part of our communities. We need hospitality.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not a fan of encampments. I'm not a fan of shelters because all of those I think do beg the issue and allow you to institutionalize things like homelessness. However, the inhumanity of what the cops and they're doing in our name to the people who are living outside, our neighbors, right? Our fellow citizens is really a moral crisis for me that you can't have this, and I suffer from purity politics in many times in my life, including around homelessness about 40 years ago. Okay, the fact that it's been that long, is part of the problem that compels me to say, find them a place. I don't care where it is, where they can be, where you will leave them the hell alone, that they can get toilets, they can get trash cans, they can get access to services, because otherwise, what the hell are we doing?
Yeah.
Really, what the hell are we doing?
Yep.
But you're right, it stigmatizes them, but my God, they're no less stigmatized by what's happening now.
Yeah. Yep. At the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves, do we want to be a welcoming community, or are we going to be a cruel and violent community.
Yep.
What do you want?
And that is our choice, right? That does become our choice.
Choice.
Um, Say, Max, I see you dropped in. You have something you want to say before we leave? I think we're kind of
Yeah. No, my phone's gonna die anyway. So I just wanted to mention hi. Thanks for having this conversation. Um, I just will briefly explain my quick little interaction I had because I think on Facebook somebody mentioned. Anyway, I honestly, you guys have probably already probably talked about it enough, but yeah, it's pretty appalling. And the comment that I made, apparently somebody like screenshotted it and put it on my work post, like, and they're like targeting me and trying to vilify me and stuff. So that's another thing, I'm not used to that, and a lot of people are that are dealing with this stuff. So anyway, thanks for having this. I kind of came in late because I forgot and I was doing something else, and um, but yeah, it sounds like we're
well. Well, and you brought up an interesting issue about the blowback that you got just for saying that and trying to attack you. So maybe there's something we can do to help that, right?
yeah, and the way that I kind of responded was kind of um off the hook, kind of unhinged too. And it was kind of a salty, like some of the same language that Donald Trump and a lot of other politicians use to vilify their opponents. I've kind of just been toying with like parodying that and saying stuff like, oh, the Christian, pseudo Christian religious, like um sports fanatics, are back at it again, like trying to dominate the public dialogue with their hateful kind of rhetoric about this one kid. And so I was just kind of, oh, I'm outraged about this. And yeah, they took that and started threatening shit about like some higher Twitter account that saw my comment about pseudo Christians and it's really wild. Anyway, if anybody wants to see that, you can message me. But it's not about me. That's what I'm saying. Is just like, this isn't even about me. I'm not trying to fucking draw attention, really. I don't know why I even try to say shit online, but it's a shit show.
Well, it does make me think that for a future discussion, it'd be worth us having a talk about mob politics in Douglas County.
Right. And yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, not perfect. Like, I know, I say a lot of shit online. I think on my private, well, it's not even a private, my Facebook page. And that's now being used against me. Anyway, whatever, it happens. But yeah, what sucks is that this is spectalizing and like sensationalizing this person's struggle. And that's all I want to say about it. But yeah, I missed the first half of this whole show, so check that out.
Um, I think I think you raise a good issue, Zach, about, having this discussion, right, on this broader picture about having to, being able to be safe and but the reality is if you're going to go against this flow, you got to take a deep breath and hold, hold your breath for a while so you don't drown. I mean, it's one of those things that when you decide to step forward, then don't, we can't be naive that you ain't going to get blowback. Now, sometimes, people like me, they don't even bother to pick on because what the hell are they going to do, maybe, right? I've been there's nothing. But economically, they think they might be able to harm somebody like you who has a business, right? So who knows? And I think that is an important thing if you um want to have a civic dialogue, if you want to solve issues, and you're not going to change the mind of the assholes who get pissed on Twitter, right? We all
Yeah.
know that, right? We're going to have to, we're not preaching to them to convince them because I think they're a lost cause to a big degree, but there's this whole group of people that actually might be open to try to understand what's going on and start to have a dialogue. At least still hopeful about that, or I wouldn't be doing this program at all, really.
Well, it seems Max's phone has died, and that
All
might be
right.
you.
That's an omen, right? We're all good. We're all done.
Well done.
All right.
Thanks for holding the
Thanks for
space as
joining.
always, Betsy.
Yeah, thank
Yes,
you
thank
for
you a
being
lot.
here.
Great.
Thank you. See you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good night.